Hello and welcome to the final video in the Narrative Clarity series, and this is going to be all about real world examples. So now that you understand the framework, I want to show you exactly how successful creators have used these combinations of motivation and mode and theme to build their audiences and achieve their goals, their professional goals. Each example in this presentation shows a different path to the framework, so there's no single right way to do this, and I hope that inspires you and shows you that it really is possible to develop a really unique and personalised narrative that fits your own career goals. So let's dive into some inspiring stories. So we're going to start with Steph Smith, who really perfectly demonstrates the pathway of career development to in progress to learn in public. So she uses the learn in public theme. Now, Steph built her career by being really open about sharing her process of learning to code. So she was a new graduate, she'd been in work for about a year or so, and she decided that she wanted to work remotely. So this was before working remotely, and it was, became the thing we all do every day. But there was a big movement around digital nomadism. So she wanted to travel, work remotely, and just learn new skills because she felt like the path from her degree wasn't exactly suitable for her. So she openly shared her process of learning to code. She was building side projects. She was really, really interested in data and trends. So she would post all these on Twitter. And she was not an expert by any means. She was very open about that. She was just learning and she was sharing simultaneously. Now, what's interesting about her is that she documented everything. So her struggles with code, and then how she overcame them as she learned, and the tutorials she used, what she learned from her side project experiments. And she turned that journey into really valuable content that others were following along with. And that transparency and the authenticity of her writing, because she then moved from Twitter and she was sharing kind of longer form blog posts. I think she wrote around 12, but she focused on quality, so they were very, very long ones. That ended up helping her become noticed, helped her pick up, some incredible opportunities. So she ended up working for a company called The Hustle that was acquired by HubSpot, and she ended up leading their trends newsletter, which perfectly matched her interest in consumer insights and trends. It also fit because she was very interested in content and writing. And then she moved on to become head of podcasts at Andreessen Horowitz. So that's a venture capital firm. And that was a role that was pretty much created for her. So those opportunities came through from visibility and the credibility that her sharing created, because she kind of exemplified the creator economy that is growing and growing. And she didn't get any of these opportunities through traditional job applications. So I think her case proves that you don't need to be an expert to start sharing. Sometimes really the most valuable and interesting content comes from documenting your journey. Okay, we're going to move to our next real life example, and this is the build in public theme, and we're looking at Good Girl Snacks. This is a really new example. This is these women, Leah Marcus and Yasmin Bakhtiar, only started sharing their stories and their narratives online about maybe a year or two ago. And they pretty much started this because they had a new venture they wanted to grow, which was their idea around a new type of pickle snack. They used an in-progress mode because they wanted to share their journey as founders, and they wanted to build in public. So what they did was they actually built a really enthusiastic community from completely zero followers around their brand Good Girl Snacks. And that was by sharing really engaging kind of short form founder diary videos as they created and launched their first product. So they took people through the initial idea to coming up with ideas for the concept and the packaging to trying to go out and find a manufacturer. Like, people were taken through the entire journey, and they didn't wait until they had a perfect product or a polished marketing strategy. They were bringing people along and then engaging people into recipe testing and co-creating almost with their community. And the other thing that I noticed with their content was that it was really fun, really authentic, really colourful, and it was very scrappy in a way. It gave people a real behind the scenes look at what it's like to build a food brand. And then by the time they launched Hot Girl Pickles, their first product, they already had that community of people who were really invested in their success, both online and in retail as well. And I think this is an excellent example of building public, because Essentially, it is about turning the development process itself into authentic marketing and then building your audience before you even have a product to sell. It's very good at iteration as well, because you can tell very early on if your product is resonating with people. And again, like I said, co-create and iterate before you have to invest a large amount of money as well. Okay, we're going to look at our next example for the documenter theme, and this is Peter Levels. Now, his example is quite similar to Build in Public, but it's just that he went about it a different way. So I'd like to highlight this to you, that he's also building new ventures. He specialises in building kind of mini products. He actually has a lot of different ventures, but he was more interested, not so much the journey, but about sharing his point of view. So his expertise on kind of independent making. So how solo creators can build products, solo coders, and the power that you have as a solo builder. So he did have a defined point of view, and he went about it by documenting everything, the thinking behind his startups. He kind of documented like the logic, the decision-making process. When I went through all his past work, he's got like product decisions. He even shares like pricing models and his thinking, shipping schedules. Very, very transparent about his mental burnout. And what I noticed about his content as well is it's not incredibly visually appealing, I would say, but it's showing like charts and screenshots, so you feel like you are actually opening up, almost like his diary, his playbook in a way. And that's really, really resonated with people because it's very unfiltered. It's like a front row seat to really radical transparency. And what makes his approach so valuable, I'd say, is that he was simply just turning his everyday decisions into teachable content. It didn't actually take that much work. And I think it resonated a lot as well, because people, particularly people looking to grow a new venture, are really desperate to understand how successful people actually think and make decisions. And Peter gave them exactly that. And he built this massive following of people who wanted to learn from his approach to building startups. And he has inspired a lot of people. If you look at the hashtag indie hackers or makers, for example, on Twitter, he's pretty much leading the pack there around that theme. Okay, we've got our next example, and this is Andrea Hernandez, and she epitomizes the thought leader theme. So she had, she basically launched her newsletter, which is called Snackshot. She started by launching it as a way to challenge some of the kind of really ridiculous trends she kept noticing within the food and beverage industry. I think her first post was around the fact that she'd noticed kind of hibiscus flavoured protein water, and it was just one trend too many. And she was originally in kind of insights and marketing, so she was very early on in her career, but she was extremely curious and she had a desire to share her perspective in that space. She wasn't even in food and beverage as a category at the beginning, but she was kind of aware of the consumer industry and felt that she had a point of view. She felt she had something to say. So what began as just a kind of small curated Twitter account where she would just share her thoughts and post photos about things that she thought were really silly and different snacks and things she knows day to day. She then quickly evolved that into a newsletter called Snackshot, which I'll highlight here, just up here. She posts that on Substack, the Substack newsletter platform. And she basically has grown this into pretty much one of the most widely read newsletters in the food and beverage space, and pretty much she owns the snack space. She's also built a cult around her really fresh, honest commentary. She makes early brand recommendations, so people are also following her for opinions and her taste. And she's also, I think what's interesting here is, although she's using a thought leader narrative because it is her point of view and she wants to share expertise, she kind of is funny about it. So she calls herself like Supreme Being. She's leading a cult. Even for forums she goes on, she's founder and cult leader. So she plays a little bit around it. And I think the key to her success is that she had strong opinions, she had strong thoughts, she had her marketing and insights background and expertise, and she wasn't afraid to share them. She didn't claim to be the world's leading expert, but she did have a unique perspective. She did have some expertise and she did have the confidence to express it. And I think this approach works particularly well for if you have an interest-led motivation. So maybe you're not clear about if you want to grow in the field you're in. Maybe it's not particularly for career. Maybe it's you're not super set on sharing an in-process journey because maybe you don't know what journey you're on. That's how Andrea started, was simply just being interested, finding it funny, sharing, and then going from there, because you're really following your genuine curiosity and your passions. And when you share these authentic perspectives about topics you care about, you're going to start attracting similar people and the people that you need that share your interests and values, and that's kind of how community starts to evolve, and your narrative starts to create professional results for you. Moving on next now to the field expander theme. Again, I mentioned in the previous videos that this has similarities with thought leader, but what's different about field expander is that it's about opening up new pockets of your field, or being very inclusive and inviting people into something that's maybe different about your field. And Dr. Maria McLennan, who is a lecturer and director of postgrad research at the Edinburgh College of University, I think really exemplifies that, and very kindly she was one of the expert interviewees for this project. Now, she bridged the fields of jewellery design and forensics by building this reputation as the world's first forensic jeweller. And she was very proactive about sharing her expertise and her opinions and her hypotheses online and at conferences and through media interviews as she pursued her academic research. And I think what was really interesting about her approach is maybe two things. One is that she created an entirely new field by combining two existing disciplines. So she didn't just work in forensics or jewellery design, she kind of pioneered the intersection of both of these. And then what she did as well is that she leveraged her insider-outsider perspective that I mentioned before. So you can maybe see from the photo here, she's heavily tattooed, her style is very distinct, and it's not what you'd expect when you think of the field of forensics or police. She worked for the police for a while. So that immediately draws your attention. It's not the type of person you'd expect in that field, so it creates curiosity, and then naturally you want to read more, and it sort of invites people who maybe didn't see themselves before in these fields and maybe thinks, actually, maybe there is a place for me. If she can do it, maybe I can do it. So she's inviting new voices, and then she established herself as the kind of go-to expert in this new domain. She makes things more relatable. So when she expanded access, she made forensic science more relatable through the lens of jewellery, which is something that everyone understands jewellery, and it helps through communication. And just to close on this, I think field expander approach is very good for people who can see connections that others miss. So if you do have another kind of insider-outsider perspective, you can use that unique viewpoint to then expand access and then try and pioneer new approaches. Okay, we will move on to the transformation theme, and we're going to talk a little bit about Anna Mackenzie. Now, Anna Mackenzie grew her influence and authority from zero. She's a very new creator, actually only really been publishing for the past 18 months. So she was at 0 followers, and she just started transparently sharing her dissatisfaction with traditional career options and her efforts to shape a new path. So she was in a full-time role. She then sort of founded a startup, was very frustrated with it, didn't see herself going back to a traditional career, but wasn't sure what to do. So she was really at a pivotal point in her life around her identity and how actually can I shape a career in my lifestyle. So she decided to start publishing. She actually started, I would say, as using the documenter theme, just sharing as she went, but then that quickly evolved to the transformation theme when she started talking about, actually, I am actively challenging these insights. I want to, I'm challenging and questioning my identity. What's interesting, she didn't wait until she had everything figured out. So she was sharing the messy middle of reinventing her career, and she was sharing personal reflections on growth and change. She was sharing visual timelines of her journey, because when you get people invested in this, they like learning public, they want to see progress. But when you're talking about something like shaping your identity, people can really see themselves in this. So progress and the milestones and mistakes are extremely interesting. And by Anna sharing her authentic journey of change, she gave others permission and inspiration to think about their own transformations. And through doing this, Anna has now grown from trying to start by offering kind of part-time work in the beauty industry, offering marketing and branding expertise, which was her expertise there, to essentially building a career around portfolio careers as a kind of thought leader and publishing her newsletter, which is widely read, and offering mentoring services and offering cohort courses for people who also want to transform their own careers. So it's very interesting. She's built a kind of multi-layered career very, very quickly as well. She's caught on to something that's resonating with a lot of people right now. And I suppose actually one of the reasons why this whole topic of narrative clarity actually interested me. So to summarise this, when you share your genuine process of change, you become a guide for others navigating similar transitions. It can be very powerful, and you can grow your career and audience from there. Okay, we move on now to our second last theme. This is the curator theme, and I'm going to talk about Marty Bell. Now, he was another person who started off interest-led, passion-led. He had no career objective in mind, no commercial outcome in mind, just had a pure passion, and he used the lifestyle mode, so it was more about curation for him, sharing moments and different pieces, his taste really, so showing rather than telling. And he began with just an interest really, a desire to share retro music that he really loved with others. So he's very, very, very into the kind of 1980s aesthetic, really loved retro music. And what he did was one weekend he built a very retro, actually I'll just highlight it for you here, it's the top image. He built a kind of old school website that he thought was really fun and shared it with a few people, and then set up an Instagram account to go along with the website and was curating that. So that's over here as well, and highlight here. So he was creating kind of themes of nostalgia, and I've read one of his interviews where he says that really what he wanted to do was just recreate this nostalgic feeling of laying by the pool in 1980s US. He's actually from Scotland, so he was kind of obsessed with America and the weather, and he said it actually started one weekend where it's a really drizzly weekend in the Highlands, and he just thought, you know, if I can't have my wee world here, I'm going to create a wee world online, and that was how it started. And what started as this kind of playful aesthetic project really resonated with a lot of people, and actually that eventually evolved into full brand world. So from his website, from Pool Suite, he started a newsletter, he started different kind of options around like merchandise and things, but then that eventually led to building a brand called Vacation, because that world he'd built, that brand, really fascinated others. So he got together with two others, used that brand, that world, that narrative he'd created to then launch a sunscreen company. And this has become basically one of the world's fastest growing sunscreen companies. You might see it all over social media. So I think this success really shows the power of curation as self-expression. He wasn't creating original music, but he wasn't creating the visuals himself. He was just showing a really original sense of taste and an aesthetic vision, and just creating something entirely new. And I think this approach works because curation is really about showing how you see the world, and when you consistently share that content, so you're very consistent, that reflects your unique perspective and taste. You're actually inviting others into your worldview. So again, going back to what I've said before about that kind of sneak peek and understanding how successful people think, and because I think Marty's aesthetic taste was very appealing to others, so naturally people want to see how you think, and then it grew, and his following grew and grew from there. So again, to summarise, his story is that he started with pure interest and passion, no commercial goal, and that authentic sharing led to opportunities that when he started this 10 years ago would never have been planned. Okay, we're going to finish up with our final theme, and this is the rituals theme, and I'll talk about the story of Melanie Mazarin here. Now, Melanie grew, she had a new venture growth and kind of motivation in mind. She knew that she wanted to start a non-alcoholic beverage brand. Now, she was starting from zero, she had no funding, she had no followers for the brand, but she knew that she wanted to ground the early story in her own personal rituals of kind of non-drinking and slow Mediterranean-inspired living. So she was growing up, she grew up in France, then moved to the US. So she wanted the brand, that drink she created, to have aspects of her own personal rituals. So drawing from her upbringing, she almost worked as hard on her own narrative, her own personal rituals, as well as growing the brand for Ghia. And what that meant is that as she grew the brand, it led to a lot of trust, because people think, okay, this product is great because she actually uses it. People buy in, people really, really trust that. So she was drawing from her upbringing, she was sharing glimpses of her lifestyle, which was really rooted in kind of, like I said, slow living, very sensory pleasure was around there. There was a lot of design, a lot of kind of Riviera colour palettes and really thoughtful aperitif rituals and curated playlists. You can probably see here in the screen, I've added some screenshots of her Instagram account. So it was all about creating a certain narrative mood. And these aspirational, well, they were aspirational but also very intimate habits that became extensions of her identity, and that helped to shape her product Ghia, not just as a product but almost like a philosophy of pleasure without alcohol. Because when you're trying to grow a product like Ghia that is around a behaviour that people don't do as a mainstream behaviour, this is a way to influence and show, okay, here's what this could look like. Here's a way to encourage people to try it and at least take a second look. So in summary, I think Melanie's approach works because particularly now, people don't just buy products, they buy into brands and lifestyles and values and vibes, really is what a lot of people are talking about now. And by Melanie sharing her authentic rituals and aesthetics, she created a brand that people want to be part of. It made non-alcoholic drinking cool. And the rituals theme is powerful because it's a way that you can build intimacy. And again, consistency is important over time. So when you share small little practices that anchor your identity, your real life, you create this really personal connection with your audience that can lead to really anything, whether it's a product, a community, writing, growing your career. So I found this very, very interesting as well as part of this research. And I wanted to end with a kind of bonus case study. This is a personal reflection. I've blurred my name just for the purposes of an academic project, but really as I was going through this research, I mentioned in the other video that, you know, the biggest blockers and where I focus on narrative clarity was all about helping people get started, get over their analysis paralysis and fear and lack of sense of direction. And I realised throughout it, I was like, I feel exactly the same. Like, I feel really, I've always been interested in publishing and putting myself out there in public, and I've seen the benefits that you can have for your professional life, but I've always been too scared. I'm very, very naturally shy. I completely overthink things. So I was like, okay, while I'm going through this research, I am going to push myself. I'm going to share a little bit on LinkedIn, and I'm going to go through this framework myself. So where I am, definitely right now I'm in interest-led. I have an established career that I'm happy with right now, but I'm not particularly keen on or interested in spending extra time growing that career outside of my day-to-day work. I've got a lot of different interests and passions, and particularly after taking this master's over the past 3 years part-time, really keen to see, is there something I could do around story that's, okay, story is related to kind of every field I assume, but I'd like to really focus on story and see what I could do. So at the moment I'm in my motivation is interest-led and passions. Got a bit of time in the evenings, weekends that I could spare to, you know, see what happens if I try something out. Then I started thinking, well, what I'm interested in, it is narrative I'm interested in. So I fall into, and I've highlighted it here, interest-led motivations, point of view mode, because I know what I want to share. I want to share my opinions. I want to share my knowledge and information out about narrative, but I want to try it in different ways, in different formats and things. So funnily enough, I would sit under thought leader, which I would never have expected after before doing this framework, but it makes complete sense because after 3 years of studying the narrative, I do have some kind of expertise, and particularly in my field of design and public sector and working a lot in experience strategy and growth. There's a lot around narrative to share, so it does actually kind of fit. So what I did was I started posting a few posts on LinkedIn, just talking about what I'd learned in my degree, and really wasn't sure if people would be interested in this. I was really worried about people's perceptions. Like I said, worried if they were interested, but also thinking, oh God, what's she posting about, showing off, or, all these things were going through my head. And I questioned if anyone would find what I was contributing to be valuable, but I posted and I put it up. And the response was so positive and really encouraging. What I noticed was there's actually a lot of really genuine interest in narrative topics. I realised that people actually started to reach out. So on top of loving and liking the posts I've made on LinkedIn, people were commenting and sharing that it resonated with them, and also sending me some direct messages as well, asking more about the degree and saying they were looking forward to be posting more. So now, instead of being fearful about this, actually now that I'm wrapped up with this Futures project, it's made me want to post more. And I'll probably start by sharing the interviews that I've done as part of this research, and probably share my own thoughts on narrative, maybe apply it under some of the lenses that I work in, and go from there. I would say in summary to this, that fears around sharing in public are often much, much bigger than the reality. I think when you share authentically about topics you care about, and that's the power of narrative, or a personal narrative, is that people respond to this, and it also opens up different possibilities from the traditional career job application routes or client routes, where you can actually, what actually excites me the most about this is actually shaping something that's really unique to me, maybe through my writing, going away and being able to work in narrative all day long. So yes, I wanted to share that personal reflection because it changed my mind a lot. It let me see the fears that people have and what the users I'd interviewed were describing, but it's also, I suppose, made me buy into this even more, but how important it is to create personal narratives for the future, and how that can help us, particularly people who are curious and particularly people who are in academia, really build exciting and really fulfilling careers. So we have arrived at the end, and I hope that those case studies have inspired you. I want to wrap up by saying, remember that your narrative journey is unique to you. Use the framework as a guide. It's not a rule book, but start with what feels right today. Allow yourself to evolve as you gain confidence and clarity, and come back to the framework whenever you need it. I think the world needs all of our unique perspectives and stories, and I really hope to read your story one day as well. So thank you so much for watching, and bye for now.